Today I'm going to read 1 Kings chapter 3. And Solomon made an affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter, and brought her into the city of David, until he had made an end of building his own house, and the house of the Lord, and the wall of Jerusalem round about. Only the people sacrificed in high places, because there was no house built unto the name of the Lord until those days. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father, only he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. In Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, Ask what I shall give thee. And Solomon said, Thou hast showed unto thy servant David my father great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth, and in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people, that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people? And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. So imagine, this is like, how many scenarios are there out there where there's a tale of somebody being told, oh, I'll grant you whatever wish you ever desired. Imagine being told that by God himself, that, what do you want? Because I'll give it to you. And this is the ultimate test of character for, if God says, I'll let you do whatever you want. And I mean, obviously, if David wanted something evil, it's not like God would have done that, but so much responsibility on a question like that, and David chose something completely selfless and what the people needed. He just, even though he was young here, obviously showed great maturity and was selfless. And think of how many people would immediately ask for something to magnify themselves rather than looking to help other people. And something I want to point out here, because somebody wrote a comment in the last video, they were like, oh, horror, it's ridiculous when people think that in old times they were speaking in the King's English. Okay, well, I personally believe that the English language is an ancient language that has been re-revived. So I think that back in biblical times, people really did speak like that, like King's English. But also, just because it's written in King James English, if you take somebody who's speaking unintelligently and translate it into a fancier English, it's not like you're going to take somebody's words that they're not a good speaker and it's going to magically sound amazing. My point is, just because you translate something, it's not going to sound fancy if somebody was speaking like a simpleton. The fact that the language is rich and poetic and advanced, that these people weren't stupid, that translates over. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. Just because it sounds extra regal because it's in King James English, that doesn't mean that it's the language itself that makes it sound fancy. They clearly spoke in very intelligent ways, and they had particular ways of speaking that are noticeable and markers of intelligence beyond the diction itself or the language itself. Anyways, I'll read verse 10 again. And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, Because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart. so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. This right here is proof that society peaked at this time. I don't think that... So you could even get wacky with it here and put on a tin foil. Solomon is connected with all sorts of magic things like sigils, and Solomon's Key is something, I don't know. I know that there's a really old video game called Solomon's Key. But anyway, Solomon is very attached to all sorts of mysticisms and mysterious hidden knowledges that we'll find out about at some point in time. But I think that technology had already peaked by this point. I don't think that Solomon didn't know about computers. And I think that Solomon probably knew about everything. I think that he really was the wisest man that ever existed, Solomon. I think that this is like a statement that is literal here, that God magnified Solomon to the extent where nobody besides Jesus knew more than him. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And he came to Jerusalem, and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings, and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants. I guess I'll just throw out here, what type of technology was involved with the Ark of the Covenant? I don't know, but it's something that people bring up, that it's possible that the Ark itself is some sort of very advanced technology. Then came there 2 women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the 3rd day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we 2 in the house. And this woman's child died in the night, because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight, and took my son from beside me, while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I rose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, The one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in 2, and give half to the one, and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son, and she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. So maybe you've heard this tale. This tale gets retold time and time again. And this is the beginning of Solomon showing his wisdom, saying something that astonishes the crowd. It's the type of thing that we see Jesus do in the New Testament many times, where he says something that just strikes the crowd with, wow, where did this guy come up with this? Because by now, this becomes sort of a meme or a trope where we've seen it a million times before. But back in the day, this blew their mind. They hadn't seen this before or heard of this type of judgment before. So very interesting. I don't know, there's a Seinfeld episode. Lo and behold, Seinfeld has a reference to the Old Testament, the 7. And Newman does this. There's a bike. Anyways, I'll just read it here. Elaine strains her neck trying to get a bike down from the wall in an antique store. Jerry had been oblivious to Elaine's struggles as he was working on getting the phone number of a woman, Christy. Interesting that there's a Christ reference in this episode. Elaine impulsively vows to give the bike to whoever fixes her neck. Kramer claims to be skilled in shiatsu technique and relieves her aching neck. He then demands the bike, despite it being a girl's model. Elaine reluctantly gives it to him, but the next day, her neck pain returns worse than ever, so she demands the bike back. Kramer refuses. They appeal to Newman as a neutral third party to resolve the dispute. He declares that they should cut the bike in half, so Elaine and Kramer can both have it. Elaine scoffs at the proposal, whereas Kramer tells Newman to give the bike to Elaine, saying he would rather it belong to her than be destroyed. Newman gives the bike to Kramer, stating that the bike's true owner wouldn't want it be destroyed. So, yeah, this is... I mean, all sorts of tales are just ripped directly out of the Bible and given a few new details. And there really is nothing new under the sun. Solomon declared that nothing was new under the sun by his point, and I agree with that. And yeah, I think that includes things like computers. I think that things like computers have come and passed, and not all societies thought that it was like the most amazing thing. They just kind of used it for automation and different things, but they just didn't put it on a pedestal. Like, I mean, the only reason I think that today people are crazy about it is because it is an amazing, magical technology that has been unleashed on the masses, and it's new to us, but people today that grew up with it, that like myself, are already tiring of it and like, man, let's go back. And these are people that the first generation of seeing this tech, and we're already like, yeah, this was a mistake, let's go back. So imagine if things like computers existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, it would be rightfully put in its place as just things to automate, and people will have moved on because it will have lost its novelty. And I think that eras just go through various technologies being completely gatekept from the populace versus giving people access to certain technologies. And there's probably cycles where after resets they keep the populace agrarian, or resets that they have to mystify everybody with the screens and the movie magic. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. God bless everyone.